Cheers.
Cheers,
everybody.
Cheers to a good night.
Thank you.
Cheers, David.
Chin
Great,
chin.
great conversations.
There we go.
Excellent. Health, wealth, and happiness. And success.
Yes.
Yeah. As you all know, this is mentality. We often say mentality is our space that we create for men to come together to be able to be vulnerable, open up, speak, check in, and just grow in general. As an extension of what we do, we speak to women because we interact with women more than we interact with anyone else in our lives. So we're really grateful to have you ladies here to share your opinions and to actually give us a little bit of insight as to the way you think and your thought process on things. I'd like to explore the idea of what it is to be masculine. Like what is being a man? What is this concept of masculinity that we all talk about? What is it and where does it come from?
But doesn't that come from what you've grown up with, be a father figure or whatever? So for me, masculinity is what I saw my dad doing.
Explain. Let's go into it a bit deeper.
So for me, in my head, my dad was perfect. The way he treated my mum with respect, the way he took care of his kids, the way he took care of his business. Like, I couldn't find fault in my father, but I can find fault in every other man because to me, he
a great reference point.
Hard to match up to.
Yeah, definitely. He kind of set the bar, how a man should be. And I used to have friends come to me going, I wish my dad was like your dad. Or people saying, you know, their moms would say, I wish my husband did what, your dad did to your wife. There was just a lot of love, positivity, respect, but values. Family were the biggest values and community. And everyone respected him.
It's interesting that you say that because I tend to find when I speak to a lot of my female friends, they often reference their dad in that respect of, okay, my dad was great and I held him on a particular pedestal. When I speak to my male friends, it generally tends to be the opposite because the tendency usually is that a man or boy feels like he's trying to always live up to that area that the dad's placed in, especially if he's got other siblings, right? It's like, okay, mum reveres the dad. There's some level of, call it fear or reverence or whatever it is. It's there, right? And then now you as a boy are looking at this man and thinking, that's what I have to get to. And so there's always been that pressure. So it's interesting that you said that, that was your benchmark.
Yeah, you're right. My brother might say something totally different.
It's like, okay, where is the truth? What is our truth? Because so many people have different stimuluses or different things, different triggers that has caused them to get to this point. The idea of what we're trying to build is to try and hear from everyone's viewpoint, to make it okay to be where you are,
I can touch on that one because I definitely felt like I was living up to be like my dad, and that was never good enough because I was very different from my dad. My dad was one of those super confident, uber friendly, Mr. Social, great with the ladies. You're not good
at that, are you?
No, wait, that was what I mean when I was younger. But back then, I really did live in his shadow because I was just like really super shy, chubby kid that didn't want to deal with any kind of confrontation. I was bullied, everything that kind of he wasn't. And I know that he would look at me and think, oh, I wish you were just different. Come on. If I come home and I'd be crying because I got bullied, he'd be more angry at me than the kid that bullied me. Which I can see now why. But to me that makes sense now. Like, come on,
Rejection.
sort yourself out. Let me help you become better. And even he tried to get me into taekwondo and fighting, and I wasn't about it at all. And so my view of masculinity was I want to be like my dad, which is a fighter, good with ladies, all of these kind of things. But I always felt inferior. So throughout my teenage years, and even into my 20s, I just didn't really feel like a man. I didn't feel man enough, which meant that I had some other traits that popped up to compensate.
You're trying to prove your manliness in other ways.
Yeah, for like spending and just reckless stuff, which we can kind of go into later. But that's kind of my reference of masculinity was my dad.
My experience was the opposite of yours. I feel like for me, it was, and you know what's really funny? I thought about this on my way here. I feel like boys inherently know what it is to be masculine, but it transforms over time. What happens is society teaches you otherwise, and you're told out of it, right? You think about, I don't know, for example, absent father, Go to school, it's femme-centric, right? You're being taught by females. Going to college, it's the same thing. Then we're taught this idea of toxic masculinity. You start to move away from everything that is truly who you are, and you start to think you are inherently bad. That's what happened to me.
Defective.
I had to revert back to my natural integrated self and kind of rebuild that relationship with that version of myself. Obviously it transformed, like I said, you know, the way you are as a boy, it's there's not as much hierarchy or pattern to what's happening. It's very loose and flowy. When you get to a man and you start to create those disciplines and those structures, and that's when it kind of turns into, you know, the truest form. And masculinity will take on many shapes and iterations as you go through the stages of life. But for me, I felt just inherently bad as a person, toxic, like, you know, and I would marginalize myself a lot around people to make them feel comfortable with me, because I'm very sure in myself. If we're not unsure, I'm sure. And that
What do
can
you
make
mean by that
people,
when you say marginalise yourself?
because I made myself a shadow
Quiet.
of myself.
Quieting
To
yourself.
make people feel comfortable, right? Because it's uncomfortable to be around someone who's
Sure of
straight,
themselves.
who's sure of themselves, right? It can be uncomfortable, and I suppose when you're a child and you grow up with these femme-centric ideas of the world, and you want to be part of that collective, you ultimately can start to take on a different iteration of yourself, which is not true. And that's why when I was talking about it in the beginning, going back to our truths,
Yes.
that's what it is for me. Also, I think when we talk about masculinity and man, I think we also talk about two different things, because they're not the same. Because being a man and being masculine is different. Masculine is an essence, and women can adopt masculine traits, and men can adopt feminine traits. So you have to be able to picturate in those, dependent on what's called for. But for me, it was the complete polar opposite of your experience. I had to refine that. Yeah.
That's a
guess
very
it-
interesting
it is
point.
interesting.
I'd love to unpack what is considered to be a masculine trait and what's considered to be a feminine trait. Especially if you see where I'm going with it. I know you know where I'm
No,
going.
no, of course,
Especially
of
in
course.
this day and age,
Yeah.
where there is such blurred lines as to what is and what isn't. Like we live in an age now where it's like, okay, those traditional ideations of what it is to be masculine and feminine are no longer the same. So how does one know where they sit, and how do you recognize within yourself if you're feeling who you really are, or if you're responding to societal, cultural, religious
I think what we're looking at though is our gender roles, which is different from masculine and feminine. So gender
There's a lot
roles
of carryover though, isn't
Yeah,
there? in
that's,
that?
that's the thing.
There's a lot of carryover.
Well, we're the only species really that went from taking the gender, which is biology, and turning that into a society, a role within society. And we're the only species that does that, and that's throughout history. So what masculine and feminine has evolved through the ages, and every era had its own understanding of what masculine. There was a time when men wore heels and wore makeup and wigs, and
Originally
the women
they did before women.
Yeah, and so all of that has evolved, and it's you know, what we've learned is obviously what we model. So you grow up in a house, and your first exposure is going to be your parents. So, and the first thing that when a baby is born, the first thing we say, is it a boy, is it a girl? You don't know it, nobody cares. When you're looking at cats or dogs, it's a dog. And then when you go to the vet, it's a female or it's a male. The genitalia at that point is, you know, it's only important when there's a matter that is related to that. But for us, that is incredibly important. The first thing we say is it a boy or is it a girl? Because from then on, now we're going to give you a role that you're going to play. Because if you're a girl, this is the role you're going to play. And if you're a boy, this is the role you're going to play. And that's going to be completely different roles. So boys do this, girls do that. Boys do this, girls do that. And you're going to get that through every single little tiny moment as you grow up in that household and outside, and how people relate to you, etc. Good boy, good girl. Girls do this, boys don't do that. You wear a dress. The boy's never going to come and say, I wear a dress, because boys don't wear dresses. Whatever it is. So but really, when it comes to where does our gender really get involved? Puberty. Before that, boys and girls are kids. They're kids.
My son's
doesn't-
favorite color is pink.
As
He,
is- as
he
is
loves
mine.
wrestling.
But that's the thing.
He loves cars, but his favorite color is pink, and he'll see the sunset and he'll go, Mommy, look, that's beautiful. Like, and I don't want to kick that out of him.
Correct.
So is
Yeah,
that-
likes pink, he likes
it doesn't
pink.
matter
It's a
because it
colour.
doesn't matter. And they're raised and they will grow up. The only information they're getting about what they should or should be doing is from the outside. And as a kid, you're modeling. You're modeling, which means, and you have to model because you are in what we call survival mode. You have to belong, so that we're trying to find that balance between belonging and being a child until they're able to take care of themselves, which means way later, maybe at 18, or not for me for sure, but it was way later. But until then, you can't take care of yourself. You gotta belong to the group you're in because you can't feed yourself. You can't put a roof over your head. So you gotta belong. So you gotta appropriate whatever is being given to you.
But fundamentally, that's where the problems begin.
Yes.
In the wanting to belong. Right? Because there are unwritten rules of humanity that says, okay, well, in order to be part of this tribe or this community, I have to conform to certain things. And so, yes, you are right. We don't know, and we don't know. There's one thing as you were speaking that came to mind that just literally just dropped to mind. You said that as a child, we learn from what our parents did, right?
Yeah, correct.
It's fair to say that generationally, I mean, we're all pretty similar, apart from Corey. We're all pretty similar in age. But generationally, we were.
How old is Corey? Can we put that?
Let's-
How old is Corey? We're curious now.
2021.
You the baby.
He's
of the-
21.
No, 27.
I was like, oh Lord.
But beyond that, the point is this, right? Is generationally, we were brought up a certain way. We had certain stimuluses because most of our parents were living at a time when, let's say, the survival was okay. Well, if he's a boy, he's this. If he's a girl, he's this. That's just the way we are.
Yeah.
You said you don't want to take that away from your child, but that's because within this small setting, we're all, to coin a word that's thrown around, we're all woke, so to speak, right? We are all very conscious of how we are in terms of well-being. The truth is, the majority of people that will watch this may not be as...
No, I know that. So, for example, like, he was like, oh, Mum, I want to put some nail varnish on, blue colour nail varnish. I was like, okay, but you're not going to do it at school. And the reason is because not everyone is as accepting as me.
Okay.
To you, it's just a colour, it looks nice, right? But to someone else, they might pick on you and bully you for it. When he reaches 18, if he wants to do it, that's his choice,
How
right?
do you teach him
So I let him wear it at home, and his dad has no issue with it. But if he wants to go to school and wear it, there's a level of protecting my son as well, right?
Okay.
So there's protecting, allowing him to be creative, allowing him to explore, but also teaching him the truth of the world, that not everyone is kind.
But is that enough to protect as opposed to give him the tools to recognize?
But it's not allowed in the school anyway.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
right.
right.
No,
It kind of saved me.
Here it isn't.
It kind of saved me
See,
in
but
a
that's the
way.
thing. So the
Here it
rules
isn't,
are
but-
coming to save you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whatever we do, so there's a cause effect, right? So
Yeah.
whether you choose this, there's an effect to it, and whatever.
Yeah.
And if you say at school you're not going to wear it, now there's a rule, which is fantastic. So it saves you, and it's like, great, that was a great parenting moment. You get to,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you say don't wear it at school because this is going to happen, there's a meaning there that's going to be really ingrained in that map of his of the world, which is
So shall I let him
who
wear the
I
nail
am
varnish
as
to
I
school?
am going out might not be accepted, so I'm going to dim that. And I speak from experience, just growing up,
Yeah.
and I've worked with some moms, and that's one thing where you may be protecting him from the bullying, from the world, and by you protecting him from that, he's understanding me going out there being me might not be okay.
I totally understand where you're coming from, which is why I also
Parenting stuff.
I
man.
wanted to,
Parenting
I
is
wanted,
stuff.
we went to the park and I wanted to observe, and he had play dates. So I have friends that would be like, you're not wearing that, period.
Okay.
And I was like, no, you can wear it around us, And he had some play dates, and one of his friends came up to him and he was like, why you've got nail varnish? That's really girly, you're not supposed to wear nail varnish. He came running to me, he was crying. He's crying his eyes out. He's like, Mummy, he's saying that, that's only what girls do. This is what do you do as a parent, right? It's like, oh, shit. So, excuse me.
No, you can swear.
So no, I
We can swear. You didn't say that.
Hey.
Hold on.
I mean, I don't know if I did the right thing, but I
We're a
said to him,
podcast
I
for
said,
people.
sweetheart, listen, in my eyes, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
In someone else's eyes, they may have taught their child differently. But I'm teaching you that
It's fine.
It's fine.
Which is great parenting. However, the point of this, or the point of my question was this, right, is there's a difference between siloed great parenting and teaching your child to recognize and identify the unspoken rules of being a man, right? I.e., can I see when this situation is toxic and know how to deal with it, as opposed to it's okay at home, just don't do it outside. If it's okay at home, it should be okay outside, right? But it's about recognizing the situation. One of the harsh realities of it, and we were having a conversation, Corey, myself, and Adele, just before you ladies came, was because of where we grew up, there were certain rules of survival that we had that caused us to walk into certain situations, always alert of those situations. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean these rules were good, but they've protected us, right? So I could walk into a situation, look at a room and be like, actually, no, I need to carry myself slightly differently, not to conform,
Yes.
but to protect
You're
myself.
reading the
They're
room.
coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
They're coping mechanisms.
So with that in mind, my point is this: what are some of the other unwritten rules? Nail varnish is one, right? But there are, at its most basic level, you could say, okay, well, as a man, you should be doing woodwork, and as a woman, you should be
Oh,
in the
I love
kitchen
woodwork,
and this
it's
kind of.
cool.
But there are certain.
wonderful.
As
That's
a
sort
woman,
of-
we're told we can't parallel park. You
I can't parallel
Thanks.
park.
No, I think with masculinity, with women, isn't it? They've taken on a lot of the traits like men, like I want to succeed, I want to make money, and I want to do this, and sometimes I think if you're in a relationship, it's like you're striving for what you want in life rather than how can you build together and support each other, because women have become quite ruthless. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think maybe some of them have been burnt in the past, so they've gone to the next level, you know.
There was a really fun quote that I read, which is, women have become the men that they were looking for in their
Yeah.
lives. But it is that what they were, so what are these men, what do they represent, and what are the qualities that they wanted to have as, you know, by their side, that they didn't find, that therefore they now became all of it, and that's why they're like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired,
Yeah.
I am tired, but also I don't have trust, and I don't know how to rely on another man, because men are going through, or a lot of the past, maybe a couple of generations, the roles have been in transition, which means the previous generations of our parents was not easier mentally. It was simply, they were in a slumber. And what I mean by that is, life was already dictated from the beginning. You are this, you are a man, you're going to go, you're going to have, you know, get a degree or not, but you're going to go work, and you're going to go work like everybody else. And the longer you stay in your job, the better it is. If you stay there 30 years, you're going to get a badge, and we're going to put it here because that means loyalty, obedience, loyalty, all of that were the traits, being like everybody else, were the traits that were, you know, celebrated.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to get married, and you're going to get kids, and you're going to do that. As a woman, you're going to do this, do that. You're going to have kids, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're in a time where women work, so they don't need to actually get those services provided by the men that from before. So I'm not my mother. So every woman's looking here saying, I'm not my mother, so I don't have the same needs as my mother. Every man is here saying, I'm not my dad. I either, you know, was looking up to him and trying to be him, or trying to be the opposite of him, because that's usually where it falls. And for women as well, it's the same thing. Is I want to be just like my mother, or I absolutely despise my mother and want to be nothing like my mother. So we do towards our way. And then we're in a transition, because the roles are a big question mark. Everybody's walking around going like, what is it to be a woman? What is it to be a man? And nobody can define that.
I feel like, I don't know if the word "we've been in a slumber" sits well with me.
Not previous
But
generation.
I feel like that's the same with everything. I think every generation that comes after will say the previous generation has been somewhat of a slumber, because the nuances are so different. The ways in which we live are so different
It's not-
each generation. And the reason I say that is this, right? Is everything you were saying was great up until a certain point. So let me rephrase. Let me rephrase. The content of what you were saying was.
This is what this is about, right?
It's open dialogue.
Yeah.
The content of what you were saying was great, to a point where, when you look at it, there was historical impact of certain things. The war changed the way in which
Absolutely.
men and women had to behave.
Absolutely.
Because the men weren't around.
Masculinity and femininity is in both sexes. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And very much like yourself, I feel like I lean into whichever I need to. Like I kind of read the room. You know, because, and also it's evolved because I didn't have a male, you know, role figure growing up. I didn't have a father in my life to show me what a father or what a man should be. So I had to take that role in my family. I had to become a man.
Yes.
Effectively, I had to show my, you know, because my mum was like single mum working 3 jobs. So I had to show my brother, you know, how to fight at school sometimes and things like that. And so that led me into being quite masculine for many, many years. And I remember I used to be very intimidated by very overtly masculine men. I never used to get into fights with women. It was always men that I used to get into fights with. You know, I just used to be intimidated by really kind of overtly
dominant,
strong masculine men. And so then I would become masculine and, you know, we'd have this kind of face-off. And then I went into a work environment where there's lots of men. And I find that it wasn't until COVID when my work, bringing in 50% of the wages, household income, went to crap, would I say, and my husband's picked up, and I was more at home more, and I was being a homemaker, and I was more with my son, and I found this feminine energy, and my husband was, you know, let's just say our relationship really, you know, and I was like, I actually am feminine to the core, and I really like that energy I bring when I lean into it, and I want to lean into it more, and I don't always have to prove myself, and I don't, you know, I don't have to, I'm glad my husband's found his masculinity as well, because he feels so much more confident in himself.
Of course.
He feels respected.
Do you think that's because the space has been created for him to do that because of COVID? I mean,
Yeah, but also because we were kind of thrown into a situation we didn't have any choice, and he left his job where he was being belittled by his boss, where he was being treated like a muppet, you know, and I was always like, I would rather eat baked beans for, you know, a year on toast, and we'll find, you know, find your flow, find a better job, find someone who's going to treat you with respect. But it kind of forced him to have to start his own business.
I'm glad you brought this up.
So he started his own business. He started to get respect from his peers because they respected his talent, and he's an amazing man, so talented. I guess you talk a lot about the nice guy. Like typically my husband is everyone refers to him as nice, sweet, kind, all this, which is great, you know.
I feel like there's a but.
No, which is great, but also, yeah, it allowed him to lean more into his masculinity because he was bringing in household income. He was, you know, he was going out to work. He was building something for himself.
That's it.
In turn, like, you know, I found that so, just for him to come, just him coming back and feeling strong made me more attracted to him.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes, correct.
And then, you know, that kind of, you know.
The energy's
Yeah.
shifted.
Leads into polarity, right? So
Yeah, and he liked me
when
having
men are allowed
like
that.
home cooked meals ready for him and stuff like that, you know. But at the same time, he's never been the type of guy that has said you can't go and do your own thing, you can't go and work. And that's why I absolutely love my husband, because we've got that balance.
My core principle here is not to resist or to put my opinion forward. It's to create a space that everyone's opinion matters. So there's no need for me to be resistant at all.
Of course.
I say there's a finality simply because sometimes when you listen to people speak, it's a 1 + 1 makes 2. And life is not always like that.
It's not.
And I think sometimes
It's not linear, it's
it's
fluid.
not at all.
Absolutely.
And I find oftentimes with the people that I speak to a lot, bear in mind, I don't announce it, but I am a qualified coach as well, but I don't announce it. But a lot of people that I speak to tend to go and seek help in places where they get this linear conceptuality of life, and this is how it is, and this happens because of this, and that happens because of that. And it doesn't always resonate with what they're going through.
Correct.
And so they're trying to take their life and squeeze it into these boxes.
Molds,
Correct.
yeah.
And that becomes dangerous.
Diagnose, but that's what therapists do, and a lot of coaches
Right.
who started or therapists, they diagnose. So what they're doing is they're taking the traits and trying to fit it. Are you bipolar? Is it borderline personality? Is it narcissism? Is it whatever? And they try to put you there, but that's not what it is.
So my point is, when
Yes.
I say that
Yeah.
there is finality to
No,
quite
there's
a
no
bit of-
finality. Everything is as fluid as it, you know. This is a theory, and it was joined by a couple of incredible researchers who have come up to that and done some mystical work, but also sustained with science. But of course, it's a theory. Everything's a theory. So that's my view on it,
We're not the
and that's
same
been my
people
experience
as we
from
were
it,
10
and that
years
is what
ago.
I'm expressing.
That's exactly what I'm trying to
Absolutely.
get. I wanted to hear what you.
I thought
had
that
to
was
say.
really interesting disagreement, by the way. Because I think anytime you put anything forward, we have to say things, right? We're all talking together, so we have to say things. So anytime you put something forwards, it always kind of maybe sounds or seems like it's supposed to be complete, but then obviously
Nothing is.
everything is limited, and it gives us the space to talk about it,
Correct.
right? I think it's been quite interesting just listening to everyone. Like we're looking at lots of the misconceptions in the past, especially. I think basically we've only mainly talked about the past really so far, and kind of looking at just all the stupidity of the different roles and all of the blunders and all the bad things that have happened as a result of people being put into these roles. But for me personally, I've never really, like a couple of times people have said, "Oh, I'm on the human side." I've heard a couple of people say that,
Yeah,
and I feel the same. And I think ultimately
Same.
everyone feels the same. But there's a weird contradiction there because we are talking about masculinity and talking about
Yeah, so
femininity,
it's
but
difficult.
then we're also kind of not. And that I've had a bit of conflict there because I've, to be honest, never really thought about it in that way. I haven't. I grew up in a house full of men, so my dad and 3 brothers and no sisters. My mum was close, but my mum and dad divorced when I was like 5, so I saw my mum a lot, but she wasn't in the house. It was very, very masculine energy, and my dad is like a really strong, powerful character, really fiery emotions and stuff like that. But I've just never, the way that I've always tried to do things is just to see what's stupid and just don't do it. That's the way that I, and that relates a lot to meditation practice. It's like the same kind of thing in meditation. You're watching the mind, just be like, you're like, nah. You know, that's what you're doing in meditation over and over again, right? And so I'm doing that on the outside. The very first spiritual teacher I ever studied said his grandma said to him, never do as others do. And I love that. And I've kind of lived by that in many ways. And it's led me to gradually reject all the things that don't make any sense. And that's just left me with what I naturally am.
For me, growing up as a little girl, and I was like, okay, so I learned to be in a masculine energy in order to be where I am today. Okay? So throughout that journey, I was attracting men that was not really into their masculine energy. And it's not because you were talking about what you are attracted to. It's the opposite, I believe. That it's the man who is attracted by the woman. And that we give a green light or not. You see? So if I'm in my masculine energy and I find a male who is in his masculine energy, he will not be attracted by me, even though I like him because I like the, the masculinity and the secure and the safe and it, but he will not be attracted by me. So it's this way. The man has to be attracted by the woman, and then the woman decide if she gives him a green light.
But just even the word masculinity, a lot of us are so conflicted because we don't actually have an understanding about it. So the idea of starting this conversation